Good day everyone, I am Sheena El Barbadillo and today I am going to discuss about managing and caring the self. Learning to be a better student. So what happens during learning? Brain and behavior changes. Your brain is primarily composed of about 85 billion neurons, which is more than the number of stars that you can see with the naked eye in the night sky. A neuron is a cell which acts as a messenger, sending information in the form of nerve impulses like electrical signals to other neurons. So when you are learning, important changes take place in your brain, including the creation of new connections between your neurons. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity. According to neurologist and educator Judy Willis, and suggested by a research-rich chapter in the second edition of Developmental Psychopathology, among many other publications, neuroplasticity is defined as the selective organizing of connections between neurons in our brains. So this means that when people repeatedly practice an activity or access a memory, their neural networks, groups of neurons that fire together, creating electrochemical pathways, shape themselves according to that activity or memory. So when people stop practicing new things, the brain will eventually eliminate or prune the connecting cells that form the pathways. Like in a system of freeways connecting various cities, the more cars going to certain destination, the wider the road that carries them needs to be. The fewer cars traveling that way, however, the fewer lanes are needed. Neuroscientists have been cursing cells that fire together, wire together, since the late 1990s, meaning that if you perform a task or recall some information, that causes different neurons to fire in concert. It strengthens the connection between those cells. Over time, these connections become thick, hardy road maps that link various parts of the brain, and stimulating one neuron in the sequence is more likely to trigger the next one to fire. Thus, says Willis, practice makes permanent. The more times the network is stimulated, the stronger and the more efficient it becomes. So which learning strategies are more compatible with your brain? Is it the strategy 1, the repeatedly activating your neurons? Or is it the strategy 2, the spacing the activation of neurons? For you to be able to not get confused, strategy number 1, which is repeatedly activating your neurons, it means that to learn arithmetic tables, for instance, you have to practice it repeatedly to establish the trail between your neurons. For example, as a baby, you will not be able to speak and walk within one day. You still have to practice a lot. While the strategy number 2, the spacing the activations of neurons, it means the spacing effect refers to the finding that long-term memory is enhanced when learning events are spaced apart in time, rather than mass in immediate succession. Here are some tips on memorizing. The first tips is to assign meaningfulness to things. Elaborate on what you are learning and apply the knowledge to something important to you. So example, your prof used something you saw in a documentary or an everyday experience. You probably don't remember what you wore last Friday, but you can remember what you wore to prom. New information is most strongly encoded when you relate it to information you already know. Encoding is deepest when you assign meaning to new information. The more logical connections you can make to the new information, the stronger the memory. Second tips is learn general and specific later. These methods help with retrieval. If you know a piece of information falls within a broader category, it's easier to access. The third tips is recite out loud in your own words until you don't need to refer your notes. So some of the students find these tips very effective since it will work to them. The next tip is teach someone else. So teaching the information to someone else is one of the best ways to learn. So if you don't have a willing listener like a parent or a friend, you can teach the wall. Best done behind closed doors. The fifth tips is use memory devices. So there are many different devices you can use to help memorize information, including chunking. Remember larger numbers in smaller chunks. Or method of looking. Visualize a familiar place and associate objects to it. Or the flashcards. Good for specific facts. Shuffle cards and recite out loud. Put a question on one side, the answer on the other. So the last tips is the practice questions. Whether they are already in your textbook or you have to make them up yourself, try to do as many as possible. Rather than reciting information, question asks you to apply your knowledge, ensuring you actually understand the information. And that would be all. Thank you for listening.